Well, hello! And it's time for episode 30 of The Condescending Evangelist. Now, I wasn't really planning on doing a video this week either, but I reviewed some information and I thought, you know what? I need to talk about something. And see, there's a lot going on in the political sphere. But, I'll say this. I noticed I got like an uptick in views in episode 27, 28. But then 29, yeah. Well, someone comments in the algorithm. What happens? Shadow ban. Someone puts a comment in, it's kind of snarky, kind of deranged, I would say. And that deploys the algorithm. So it just is what it is. That's why I can't be a content creator. Because people will see my content and they'll feel entitled to put something that is deranged, low class, and there's just no getting around that. And so what happens, the algorithm is deployed. How do you go from, let me just take a look here. How do you go from this is not a lot of views, but see, prior to, let's see, episode 27, the video that had the largest amount of views was episode 7. There's a comment on here. Hang on a second. Oh, there's Mike, there's me. Okay. 34 views. Like I said, not a lot of views. But then, when I made my episode 27, which was, first video in over a month, I got 27 views. Prior to that, most videos are like 2, 1, 2, 2, 3, 2, 5, 2, 3, 3, 2. I didn't get more than 5 views on a video, which is part of the reason I stopped doing. But then the Charlie Kirk event happened. I'm like, I gotta talk about this. And so I got 27 views. I don't do it for likes. I don't do it for views. It's about the information. And so the next video got 47 views. Well, then I get a comment. Looks pretty gay to me. I'm not complaining about this. It's just I wish the algorithm would ignore something like that and just let the channel grow organically. Just because, we can't have terms of service, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're punishing the content creator for something some jackhole decides to comment on. Because he doesn't like something about me. What am I going to do about that? I can't do anything about that. There's information that needs to be explained. I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out. But there's information that needs to be presented and explained. Okay? I don't have all the answers, but I have some insights. Like I said, Charlie Kirk went to my high school. Not my high school. He went to a high school that looks like my high school in the same district. So, I don't know, but does that have to do anything? Well, District 214 also happens to have a high school called Buffalo Grove High School, which is close to Wheeling. There's something about Buffalo Grove High School. We used to have Jewish holidays off. I thought it was kind of strange. Like, I knew one person that was Jewish in my high school, but I didn't know really anyone else. Well, Buffalo Grove High School has a high percentage of Jewish students. Charlie Kirk was talking about Israel before he passed away, so take that as you will. My college roommate went to Buffalo Grove High School. He wasn't Jewish, but that's where he went to high school. In my freshman year, my college roommate was a senior, I think. Is he a senior? I believe he was. I was a freshman. He went to Buffalo Grove High School. I'm just saying. Worked at Arthur Anderson. Arthur Anderson, of course, had all kinds of problems. If anyone remembers the Enron scandal. So I'm just saying there's a reason they've done what they've done on YouTube. I may be partially responsible. Because I do have some insights in, I used to work in my dad's business when he was right across the street from Arthur Anderson. I'm just saying. So anyways, I want to talk about information. Look, I don't care if this video doesn't get watched by anybody. It's going to be out there. Someone will see it. So I just want to begin by saying, okay, remember Charlie Kirk, when it happened. Not many people talk about the significance of when it happened. September 10th, day before 9/11. See, he was a professing Christian. You see, Rob Skiba, I talk about him, he wasn't alone. A lot of people have attributed the real birth date of Jesus as 9/11, 3 BC. Basically 2 years before what is known to be the year 1 of our Lord. That's where the 3 BC comes from. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it's basically, I think it is about 3 years before year 1. It would be -2, but it'd be 3 BC of year 1. If that makes any sense. 9/11. Why is that significant? Well, when did 9/11 happen? When did the events known as 9/11 happen? Obviously on September 11th, 2001. Well, that would be 2,000 years after 9/11, year 1 of our Lord. Well, if it was 3 years before, it would be actually effectively 2,003 years after the birth. What year was the Iraq War? When did that start? March 2003. Yeah. See, they play these games. But see, I think it's more spiritual that's going on. These are people that worship Satan. They hide themselves, though. They are the children of the darkness. Because they stay in the dark. They stay in the shadows. But see, you can see, if you have discernment, you can see the fruits of their labor. And like I said, Charlie Kirk, that was, I think, a satanic ritual event. Now, like I said, I talked about him going, he went to my high school, or went to the same district, a high school in the same district. The high school is an exact replica of Elk Grove High School. And I had a roommate, my college roommate, went to Buffalo Grove High School. And that's the reason we used to get Jewish holidays off. Now, the event that occurred with Charlie Kirk happened within 2 weeks of Rosh Hashanah. And if I'm not mistaken, today, let me make sure of that. Today or tomorrow. Let me make sure of this before I move forward. Okay. I think it started yesterday. I think it ends today. It ended at sundown. Today, I think. Let me just verify this. Okay, it actually concluded last night. It started Wednesday, October 1st, concluded nightfall. Okay. Okay. So, it's a Day of Atonement. And actually, that's right, because members of the Cubs broadcast actually, one person that was part of the Cubs broadcast, one person was part of the radio station. They were off on the game 2 Wednesday. So they were off Thursday. That's right. They were off Thursday. That's right. Game 3. Okay. So, what's the significance of that? Well, like I said, Charlie Kirk passed away. The event happened September 10th, within 2 weeks of Rosh Hashanah. The Cubs, look, Charlie Kirk was a Cubs fan. Cubs are playing on Day of Atonement. Game 3 is Day of Atonement. They win the game against the Padres. But see, it's also what? It's homecoming week. For who? NIU. NIU lost last week to who? San Diego State. The Aztecs. I haven't dug in enough to that. San Diego State, Tony Gwynn went to San Diego State. Played for the Padres. I haven't dug in enough into that, but there's something right there. But see, homecoming. What's significant about homecoming regarding NIU? NIU has the oldest homecoming tradition in all the country. It may not, when it started, it may not have been as big as like other places like Kansas, University of Kansas, University of Illinois, University of Missouri, Baylor University. They all had probably bigger homecoming events from basically 1909 to 1911. 9/11. And NIU's homecoming tradition started in 1903. And it was dubbed, I won't say officially, but it was dubbed homecoming in 1906. So, as far as I'm concerned, until you could show me like anywhere having an older homecoming tradition, NIU has the oldest. Now, it wasn't continuous. It's the 118th, which is like, okay, how many years ago was 117? Would be 1908. So there were 5 years that they didn't have homecoming, or what the alumni game, which is what it was originally called. The reason they called it that was it was a game between. It didn't involve intercollegiate. It didn't involve an intercollegiate game like Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, and Baylor. But it did involve a football game against the alumni, players that graduated. It was in 1906, I think, when they posted it on the Northern Star, they did start to encourage alumni in general to show up. And it was probably, I don't know, it was probably after Missouri, Illinois, Kansas decided to do it during an intercollegiate game, and NIU did the same thing. My thing is, look, they called it homecoming. That means they had festivities, just not maybe as big as some of the other places, but they had festivities, right? And like I said, Day of Atonement is one of the fall feasts. It's actually a fast, I think. But they had festivities with NIU homecoming going back to 1903. And why is this significant? What does it have to do with what we were talking about with 9/11? Well, remember I did a video. Let me see which episode it was. It was the video I was saying that had the most views of any video. Episode 7. That was March 28th. And see, there was something that happened at Home Student Center. Lightning strike. 3:30 a.m. Well, that would have been, I think I calculated it to be 28 weeks. I think that's what it was. It's been 28 weeks since then. Well, I know how many days I calculated till between that day and tomorrow, which is the homecoming game, is 191. Well, right there. There it is. You say, well, I don't get it. Well, look at this. You see that? The lightning striking on top of the student center? What caused that? Just nature? Well, I mean, who controls the nature? God, right? Why would he do that? 191 days before homecoming. Well, you know what happened. I already said what happened on 9/10. Not on 9/11. Say, wait, you say God did that? Well, everything happens that happens under heaven. God's aware of it, right? So he allowed it at the very least. I'm not saying he did it, but he allowed it. So why would he allow it? 191 days before homecoming. Well, like I said, yeah, it is Yom Kippur. Yesterday, the end of at sundown, up until sundown yesterday. We're moving into a new year on the calendar. So it's this, homecoming falls. It's the 118th homecoming, which means what? Next year is 119. You know what else happened this week? The announcement of NIU's Mountain West financials were revealed. Why would that all of a sudden be revealed? Maybe it was on 3, Brett McMurphy, just asking a question here. Because he would have looked at like, oh, that's interesting. NIU's 119th homecoming is next year when they're in the Mountain West. I'm not saying I can't get inside of it. I would have to maybe send him a direct message and ask him. Maybe I will at some point. Why did you decide to reveal that information this week? Is it because it's... Well, you also had news about dismissal being denied, and you had the Pack fans. They're all giddy about that, but it's like, it's really no big deal. For it has to reach a certain standard for a case to be dismissed. I was thinking it might get dismissed simply because of the way the Pack heads were acting. But it's like, okay. And see, Gloria Navarez, she puts out a statement. We're looking forward to the discovery phase. She's not saying that unless she knows something. And see, the Pack heads all assume that Gloria is evil. But it's like, there has to be a reason. They look at like 2 times is that was they call that extortion. Well, my initial argument to that was they were trying to, they had to accommodate. They had to rearrange their schedule. Well, not so much. I was wrong about something. Apparently, there were no games postponed. I thought there were. They just played one less conference game. What that did do, though, was some teams had to lose a home conference game. And I think in some cases, they still had to play either Oregon State or Washington State on the road. So I was like, oh, that's no good either. Um, because it's like, well, that affects, the conference by in general. And so when you think about the exiting members of the Mount West, they really don't have a good place to stand. They really don't. I I honestly look at the whole deal. I'm like, I wouldn't want to join a conference that had two, castaways in essence. I really don't get what the exiting five are doing. I don't want to make this about college football totally about conference realignment. I was pointing out something because it is homecoming with NIU and their financials were released, and I'm trying to understand why all the timing of that, because it did happen when in the midst of the court denied. It's like all of a sudden NIU financials are revealed. I'm like, and then of course, what also happens? NIU is going to be in the pack for wrestling, and their gymnastics is going to be in the Mount West. I'm like, oh, that's funny. Amidst all this, it's homecoming week. I mean, I'm just saying. But see, I think there's something spiritual going on. And I think the evidence I have is this: 191 days before homecoming. Is it not 191? Let's shift the numbers around. 9/11 is right there. Nine 11. 9/11. 191. Put the 9, flip the 9 and the 1. And the next year is 119. Homecoming number 119. Just reverse that. Like, there's something happening. Well, we already seen something happen with Charlie Kirk. See, what does he have to do? Well, who's the shooter? Who's the alleged shooter? To me, it doesn't matter who the, if the deep state actually, if it was, it just tells me that Satan, his capability isn't that great. And people are going to think the deep state has all this ability. Well, they're Satan worshippers. They have some ability, but it's like, it happens the day before 9/10 or 9/11, not 9/10. This year is 118, 1 year before 119. There's the connection, but also the alleged shooter. Where did he go to school? Well, the event was at Utah Valley, right? But where did the shooter, the alleged shooter, go? Utah State. And see, Sean Frazier was recently in the news as someone who was a finalist, or, well, I don't know if he was a finalist, but there was discussion about him going to Utah State. All of a sudden that event happens, guess what? Like, after the memorial service in Glendale, Arizona, they announce a new AD. It's not Sean Frazier. Now, I don't know how much more I want to go, but it's like, there's something spiritual. It's something we don't see, but it's there. How do I know it's there? Because there's too much evidence. Too much evidence. Plus, I look at I bring in other factors. We'll go back to 2021. On 9/11, NIU is playing who? It's hosting who? Wyoming. Okay. Remember the J6 hearing? Well, the two token Republicans, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney. Well, gee, Adam Kinzinger represents the district NIU happens to be in. Oh, that's interesting. Liz Cheney represents the district of Wyoming. Wyoming's at NIU on 9/11. Who's the vice president on 9/11? Dick Cheney. Her father. And the Speaker of the House, Hester, who got his master's at NIU. And he represented the district. And he would have been, during 9/11, he was the Speaker of the House. One thing I was going to look up. I'm going to look it up right now. I know when in 1987. In 1987 is when he became a Congress person. That's what I was wondering. He was a wrestling coach. Like I said, guess where NIU ended up? Guess where their wrestling program ended up? In the pack. And so, that's why I look at these things. Because there's something behind it. There's a picture. You don't see it when it's going on. After the fact, all of a sudden you see a picture. Well, it's like, who's painting? Who's the artist? Well, it is God the Most High. He's the artist. Satan thinks he's the artist. But he doesn't recognize the whole picture. That's the point. And so, I don't understand. Well, the best way to explain it is the message of the cross. It's like Charlie Kirk, Charlie Kirk was preaching the gospel when he was shot. That, I can't come up with a better illustration of the message of the cross. And God seems very demented, very... Was it God that shot him? Well, you just said he's the artist. I'll say it again. Did God shoot Charlie Kirk? Who wants to be the Most High? Lucifer. Lucifer thinks he's painting a masterpiece. He's just scribbling around. God's the one who's actually painting the whole thing. You know, it's like, oh, that looks ugly. You got to look at the whole picture. Only he can look at the whole picture. But he's giving people some insights. That's what I'm saying. Satan, all he can do is scribble around on something. That's all he can do. And so, on 9/10, I'm going to do something. Day before 9/11. And so he does that. But then it's like, oh, wait a second. Within 2 weeks of Rosh Hashanah, right? And then yesterday, Cubs, right? They take game 3 against the Padres. And this is 5 days after NIU lost to San Diego State by the same score that they lost back in 1984. Yeah. I'm more of an artist than Lucifer can ever be. And that's what pisses him off. That's why he does what he does. All he can do is scribble. Okay, let's go to the scriptures. Let me bring us all home. Ephesians 6, starting with verse 10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God, so that you can make your stand against devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this world's darkness, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, take out the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you'll be able to stand your ground, and having done everything to stand firm. Then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness arrayed, and with your feet fitted with the readiness of the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Pray in the Spirit all times. How do we deal with all the evil and stuff? Well, this is how we're supposed to do it. Pray in the Spirit at all times, with every kind of prayer and petition. To this end, stay alert with all perseverance in your prayers for all the saints. Pray also for me that whenever I open my mouth, words may be given to me, so that I will boldly make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains. People in the prosperity gospel need to understand this. Pray that I may proclaim it fearlessly as I should. Paul is an ambassador in chains. Why does he say it like that? Well, it ties to what he's talking about. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. And see, you know, I talk about other people sometimes, and I have my own personality quirks. I'm an introvert. And so I will say things. It's not out of hate or malice. It's just, I'm not someone who fully responds to certain things the way other people do, I guess. So, yeah, it's hard to explain. I think people I try to understand when someone says something to me. I'm not gonna just respond right away, and I think people don't like that. I'm like, I'm thinking about what you're saying, um, and I think that people lose sight of the simple truths. And so, like, when that whole operation was going on from 2017 to 2020, I think people were kind of going all there. There were people going all over the map, and it was like, yeah, there's something not right here. We're not to fight fire with fire. I think that's what was going on. I think people think that's what you got to do. No, 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 that's not how it does. That's not what you do. You don't fight esoteric nonsense with more esoteric stuff. I was simply exposing things, and I'm going to continue to expose things. But I also think it's important to be in prayer. And that's what seemed to be lost on some people, not all. But some people then would go down some real dark rabbit holes, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going there. And so the whole point of what I think, it's like I said, it's his story. It just so happens, like I said, and then the lightning strike happens, and then it's 191. Like, oh, there's something right there. And I thought about Charlie Kirk incident, and I was like, yeah, it's the day before. Well, this year is 118th, and it's the 118th homecoming, which means next year is the 119th year they joined the Mountain West. Yeah, there's something happening with that. I don't fully know, but those who study the esoteric stuff, I don't really study it. I don't care to. Because I go with what's in the scriptures. There's an occultic. See, this gets into like white versus black stuff, white hat versus black hat stuff. I think there are those who believe that this is the white hat, white magic, right? And then you have the black magic, which is the hidden information. And see, that's where I get it. That's where I have a problem. I don't deny that there's hidden information, but see, why did the Luciferians? We know they're there. We know they're doing things. Bohemian Grove, stuff that goes on there and what goes on, well, Epstein Island and other places, you know, all around the world. It's not just like pockets here in America. No, it's all over the world. Why do these people hide themselves when the church? That's when they'll say that. I see it's like the church represents the white magic, and then these other places represent the black magic. No, I mean, to some extent, yes, because we know, like, for example, a lot of paganism has incorporated itself into the church. So we know that there's some truth there. However, we can't judge. We can only judge by what? The fruits. And we can only judge by the what is, are they teaching the message of the cross, which ties to testing the spirits? Jesus coming in the flesh. Right? Are they doing that? Well, then, what do you say? Just because some paganism has come, it's like, is it Gnostic what they're teaching? That's the point. And so, if people think I'm being Gnostic, like, no. I'm not. No, I'm pointing something out that God would be aware of. God's aware of the sparrow falling. My question is, okay, did God do that, or did he just allow that to happen? It seems something supernatural that occurred. It happened at 3:30 a.m. So, I haven't figured out how many days after, like if it was 9/10. Well, let's see. I figured 191 tomorrow, which is the 4th, so go back 24 days. 167. I don't know if that means anything. I don't know. But 191 seems to mean something. Tied to 9/11. 119 next year. That's definitely 9/11 in reverse. So what does it mean? What I do know is we have evidence of something with Charlie Kirk, and there's a connection, NIU connection. Already explained. The shooter. He didn't go to NIU. He went to Utah State. Sean Fraser was in discussions, taking the AD position. So there's your connection, if you're wondering. Because Charlie Kirk, he went, like I said, District 214. And see, this year, I remember I did the first video on the 17th anniversary of the NIU shooting. And of course, the shooter went to my high school. And so there's more to explain. I'm only really just skimming over the surface. I don't really want to go too far, that much below the surface, though. I don't think I have to. There's enough there on the surface. You don't have to go very far down to see more stuff. Like I said, talking about Dennis Hastert, he was the Speaker of the House at the time 9/11 happened. Dick Cheney was the Vice President. You have Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. So right there, that's a red flag to anybody paying attention. And I use hosting Wyoming. It's like, well, you just can't they just can't put all that together on 9/11. You can't just put all that together. I was like, that's something that's put together in another dimension. Was it the second heaven? Probably. Because it did, the result of that was what? Well, it was like, as I see it, they've been able to bamboozle the country into thinking that 9/11 was January 6th was an insurrection. Tucker Carlson comes along, shows video footage, he gets fired. Now, what did you notice? After Jimmy Kimmel lied about the shooter, the alleged shooter, being conservative, Republican, and he gets fired. And of course, all of a sudden the left is all of a sudden about what? The First Amendment. All of a sudden. It's hilarious, right? For someone from my vantage point who's been shadow banned and outright banned on YouTube. All of a sudden, it's a First Amendment thing. Kiss my you-know-what. You know? And then you got Tucker Carlson, who got fired for showing that J6 footage. Basically. Giving an alternative view of what happened there. I'm like, it's clown world at the end of the day. Jimmy Kimmel could go on Colbert, complain, we can't ever have someone like this as president ever again. Okay. Yeah, Glenn Beck and Tucker Carlson are like, are you guys for real? So it was okay with Obama basically getting Glenn Beck fired and Biden getting Tucker Carlson fired in essence. That's fine. Right? I don't agree with it. You know, see, the thing is Trump has said things, but it was Disney. It was Michael Eicher. And the same thing happened to Roseanne. And there were others. Other conservatives. It's like a liberal gets fired. And it's like all of a sudden it's a constitutional crisis. And even some libertarians, they jump on that bandwagon. I'm like, you're full of crap. Where were you with Tucker Carlson? Where were you with Glenn Beck? I didn't hear any of you. Because you don't like conservatism. Yeah, go. Whatever. Give me a break. I didn't want to make this political. I just want to point out the absolute fallacy and hypocrisy of the left. They love to talk about the conservatives. Believe me, I'm not a whole fan of any party, political party. But what I see liberals do, they circle the wagons. What I see conservatives do, they point inward. That's what I see. And so that's why I think there's a bigger picture going on with all this. And my alma mater seems to be a big part of what goes on. You say, what? Well, I've already identified some things. You know, when you talk about 9/11, no one, look, I give you personal insight. If you think I'm talking out my butt, well, my professor said in front of the class, you can look this up, the money that was donated to the university to build a new business building, yeah, that was, you can probably look this up with a FOIA request. That was cashed within 2 months of 9/11, in that summer, 2001. Like I said, it was the Speaker of the House at the time. That's all I'm saying. He might have been on the phone, because he might have had inside knowledge. We know Dennis Hastert was compromised. That's the one thing I think, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, Dennis Hastert was definitely compromised. And so I wouldn't doubt. Better cash those stocks. I'm not going to tell you why. Just do it. You say, how do you know? I was told. The stocks were cashed within 2 months. Oh, but they were just going to build the building. They cashed them all, I think. I think what usually happens with building projects, that they cash them bit by bit as the project goes on. From what I understood, they cashed it all. $20 million. Oh, they just, that's what happened for a bill. Like I said, if it's a project that takes a couple years, why would you cash them all? Because now it's just you would cash a portion of them to pay whatever you owe for whatever. They cashed it all. That's what I understood. No one talks about that. Except me. Because I was told. That's what I was told. So that gets into, so you think, what? Well, in 2008? See, when was Hastert arrested? Well, he was arrested, actually. Well, when was he voted out of office? It had to do with the Mark Foley scandal. It's when he was voted out of office. When was he arrested? It was like late May 2015. Let's see, what happened in June 2015? Oh yeah, Trump's going down the escalator. There's a reason I've been shadow banned. And outright banned. And then someone decides to say something and so you can look the information up. I know what I was told. I don't think you cash stocks in full at the start of building a project, building a building. You cash them bit by bit as the project's ongoing to pay the contractor what he's owed. Buildings aren't paid for all up front. I would say look up the information for yourself. That is all. Shabbat Shalom.
Goodbye, Toledo.